Live. And I believe we're live. Not exactly the first ever video, but welcome to the channel. It's been long overdue. Raj and Rambo, how I've introduced so many videos. We eventually decided it's lockdown season. People need content. We've got plenty of time free. Raj feels like a brand new man after his NHS coronavirus recovery. And so we decided to create this YouTube channel. So if you're new to the channel, make sure you hit subscribe, please. So we can hit some milestones together. And in case you're wondering what's going to be coming your way, plenty of football content. We're going to be doing some tactical analysis on games like we are today. Inter Milan, Barcelona, infamous Pep Guardiola, Jose Mourinho match. And we're going to basically deep dive into that game. We're also going to be looking at latest football news. We're going to get some guests on as well that you'd definitely recognize. All in all, there's lots to look forward to. So make sure you subscribe. Raj, how you doing, bro?
Yeah, very good, very good. Excited for the new channel and especially for today's video. I think it was a real tactical wonder of a game, I think, between both managers.
Well, it's been nicknamed the Mourinho Masterclass. So I'll let you kick things off because you were the one who came up with the idea of you said to me, we have to do Inter Milan Barcelona. Just before I actually do, if you've got any suggestions of content you want to see us do, drop it in the comments below. Or if you're in the chat right now, drop it in the chat. We'll answer questions as we go along as well. But Raj, kick us off because I know you're very, very, very pumped for this.
Yeah, I think one of the main reasons I was keen to do it is the contrast in styles between the two managers. I think obviously we know Mourinho's style is quite pragmatic off the ball, but he does like those attacking influence in terms of counter-attacks. He loves counter-attacking, and his Inter Milan side were just one of the greatest proponents of that in modern history. And then obviously Pep, this is where he laid down the foundations of his tiki-taka game, the possession style, and he's carried that through all the way through his career. And these were the type of games which really laid the foundations for that. And I think it's quite poignant. It was 10-year anniversary of the game on Monday, so I think it's quite a good time to look back on it. And yeah, and again, we saw a shock result. We'll come to that later. But there was so many things happening in the game from a tactical point of view.
Yeah, I think I had no idea it was a 10-year anniversary to fail. Although it makes sense because in 2010.
Yeah.
I think people almost forget that it was a two-legged tie because of that one game. When in actual fact, Barcelona were this close to actually scraping through in the end. But we'll start at the top. It's the best way to go. Barcelona actually took the lead. And thankfully, Raj sent me the link to the game because I was trying to find it everywhere. And I basically watched the entire game through. Raj has obviously probably watched it about 10, 15 times. But in the initial phase, because obviously this, as you said, it's 10 years ago. So it's almost like quite tricky to remember the game. Barcelona actually started the game very, very well. And they seem to have the game, and in them times, Barcelona was so dominant with the Xavi, Busquets midfield, and PK, Puyol at the back. Everything was sort of sussed out. Everything had a plan. Alves at right back, Maxwell at left back, and it just felt like it was inevitable what was going to happen because of the start of the game.
Definitely, they got into the flow of their possession very quickly. And I just want to point out something about Pep's team selection. It was a bit peculiar. He's obviously made his name on a 4-3-3 formation. But in this game, he played a bit of a strange formation. He had the four at the back. Then he had three in midfield. Iniesta, unfortunately, was injured. So he had Busquets, Xavi, and then Seydou Keita, who's a good ball progressor in midfield. But then what he did with the front three was very interesting. Of course, that Ibrahimovic-Samuel Eto'o swap had happened the previous summer. So Barca now had Ibra instead of Eto'o. So Ibra played as the focal point up top. But then wide right, he had Pedro. But then what he did with Messi, he tucked him inside in a number 10 position. So actually, Barca didn't actually have a natural left winger. It ended up being a 4-3-3 with the three midfielders and a one with Messi in behind the front two of Ibra and Pedro. And actually, that actually worked well for Barca in the initial goings because Inter weren't really sure what to do with that left-hand side because obviously there's no left winger for Maicon and Samuel Eto'o, who's playing on the right wing, to deal with. So Maxwell from left back was constantly bombing down the left wing, and that meant Maicon was quite occupied with him. But then often it would be either Messi coming from the number 10 position onto the left-hand side or Keita coming from the midfield and occupying that space on the left. Inter couldn't get their heads around that kind of system at the start, and that's how the first goal came. It came with Keita coming on the left, and Maicon actually got dragged inside to deal with Keita, and then that left Maxwell with an overlapping run, and Eto'o didn't trap that. So that's how the first goal came. Maxwell assisted Pedro, goal.
I actually thought that goal was a bit of a blessing in disguise for Inter because, and I've touched on this in my notes, Keita almost played like as a fake left winger. And I think a big part of the reason for that was because Maicon was there. And Maicon was known to be irresponsible defensively, which got worse and worse as the years went on. And so the problem that Barca gave Maicon was, are you going to follow Keita inside? Because if you do, that he leaves that overlapping space for Maxwell. And I know Samuel Eto'o was a relatively hard worker, but he's not going to track him for the entirety of the game.
No.
And then added to that, because Messi was drifting left, it almost meant they were overloading the left-hand side against Maicon. And Keita was essentially playing as a central midfielder for such long periods, even though he started off on the left side. But once that goal went in, which I'm pretty sure was assisted, which was finished by Pedro.
Finished by Pedro,
which he was also playing in a really bizarre area of the pitch at that time in the game. It felt as though at that moment, this is Barca's game. And then obviously as the game progressed, that fake left winger actually became what initially looked like Barca's trump card, actually ended up being Barca's thing that killed them. Because over the period of the game, Maicon suddenly realised, I won't actually follow Keita inside. And one thing I think generally people will notice about Jose Mourinho's teams are his teams defend in zones. So if a player vacates his zone or someone they're marking vacates that zone, they don't tend to track them unless they think they're dangerous. And if there was ever a game that signified that, it was this game. Signaled. And I think you saw that on the opposite side where Messi came inside and Zanetti wouldn't follow him because he knew Alves was coming around the outside, so Cambiasso and Motta would pick up Messi. But in the first period, Barca couldn't get hold of how to do that properly.
No, definitely. And I think Inter, what you said is right. Mourinho's teams, they defend well in zones. And the other thing is his best teams react well to what's going on in the game, whether that's due to being drilled in training, reacting to different scenarios, but also touchline instruction from Mourinho. I remember a few years ago, when he said Luke Shaw, he defended with his body, but my brain.
Yeah,
that is the type of manager he is. He loves giving instructions. And I wouldn't be surprised. Basically, what happened then, you saw there were some exactly the same scenarios as the first goal where Keita came inside, Maicon followed him, and Maxwell overlapping. That happened again. But this time, Eto'o actually helped a lot more defensively. Yeah. He positioned himself deep on the right, and he either marked Keita or he trapped the overlapping run of Maxwell. So it meant it was 2v2 and there was no overloads on that left-hand side. And I like how you mentioned the two ball winners in midfield, Cambiasso and Motta. I think they played a massive role. Just touching a bit on Mourinho's selection, he'd interestingly flitted a lot between the 4-4-2 diamond and the 4-2-3-1, which went for in this game. Interestingly, Inter and Barca actually played each other in the group stages as well of that same competition in the year. And he went for the diamond in both scenarios. But it meant they had no attacking threat. I think he learned from that, really, Mourinho. Pete Mourinho was a brilliant learner. He learned from his mistakes and he didn't repeat them. And again, he showed it in this game with a 4-2-3-1. So yeah, going back to the ball winners, Cambiasso and Motta, they, as you said, were crucial in denying Messi space in between the lines. I think there was a stat on the game where Messi actually attempted 20 dribbles. He completed 4 of them, which is pretty staggering for probably, as Gary Lineker would say, for example, the best dribbler of all time.
Yeah.
And he couldn't get any joy because Cambiasso and Motta, they were so good at tracking him and then winning the ball off him. And they just denied him any space. And then even when he came back deeper to receive it, one of them would always go and follow him. So he didn't have any space to maneuver it.
I think Mourinho said a few times that in that particular tie, all he told his team was just don't let Messi get the ball, which is near impossible to do because even back then, Barca was so Messi-centric. That was 2 years ago. But whenever Barca had the opportunity to get the ball into Messi, that would be the way they'd score goals. But the other way they'd score goals is Dani Alves. That season alone, he got 11 assists. So he was always potent going forward, and a lot of the times he didn't need to get an assist or a goal for him to be potent going forward. But the way, and it comes to Cambiasso and Motta, the way they handled Messi meant Zanetti could handle Alves, which meant that negated 2 of Barca's most potent attacking threats in Messi and Alves on that right side. And we'll come to this later, but you actually saw in the second half, Messi started to drift to the left-hand side, and they just did the exact same on the opposite side. So as the game went on, I felt like Mourinho's team were constantly learning as well. It was like a cycle of Pep kept trying little things. I think on about 25, 26 minutes, Zlatan Ibrahimovic comes to the halfway line to receive the ball about 4 times in the space of 6 minutes. And they go, and I was mentioning about the zones. The only time that Mourinho's teams are allowed out of the zones is when a player moves into a position where they could potentially threaten. And Ibrahimovic was picking the ball up, and they went to the old school saying of English saying, I think it is. Maybe it's not. English people might have just stole it, but it's that old saying of don't let them turn, don't let them get their heads up. And all that was happening is Ibrahimovic was dropping in to pick the ball up. Messi was moving further upfield, and Pedro was moving into a false 9. But anytime he got the ball, and I think 3 out of the 4 times he got it, Samuel was right up his backside. And he was basically saying, I won't follow you unless you're dangerous, and then I'll follow you. And I thought that was just fascinating because that requires a serious amount of discipline. And in the attack into that, and I think this is where the game changed a lot. That group stage game, as you mentioned, they were struggling to get forward. In the attacking sense, Cambiasso and Motta are huge because, again, a very old English saying that they played to is get the centre-backs turning. Every time they got the ball, the balls were just getting hit into the channels. And Diego Milito, people slept on how hard this guy worked. He was just hunting balls into the channel. And then, better than just hunting them into the channel, he's picking the ball up and he was just holding it. He was delaying and delaying and delaying. And if you're watching the game, if you find that sort of football frustrating, then I'm sorry. But in the sense of actual genius, it was actually genius.
You could probably call him the original Jamie Vardy, couldn't you, really, the way he was those balls down the channels. And then, as you said, he had that added dimension of being able to hold it up with his strength, which obviously Vardy doesn't do so much of. Yeah. But I like how you mentioned Cambiasso and Motta in an attacking sense as well. You're right, they were good at playing those direct balls in the channels. And also, the fact their ball winning was that good, it actually caught Barca off guard. Because when they won the ball back in some scenarios, Barca had all their men committed forwards. Yeah. And that's when Motta and Cambiasso came into play, snapping into tackles, winning the ball, and quickly delivering those passes to the wide channel. And I think that was really the cornerstone of Mourinho's success, those two in the middle. And then I think it was interesting then how Barca, their philosophy really, we've grown accustomed to it throughout the years with Pep. But I've got an interesting quote from Pep's assistant manager, Dominic Torrent, who was the assistant until Arteta came into Man City. He was followed Pep everywhere throughout his career. And he said, when we lose the ball, talking about Barca, we must press high in 5 seconds. And if we don't regain it in those 5 seconds, then foul and then reset your shape. Oh, really? So I think the key for Inter was to evade that press within the 5 seconds of Barca losing the ball. So once Motta and Cambiasso won it back, the key was then how do Inter evade the press, and we'll go into that later on.
Yeah. The other area, we mentioned it briefly earlier, was that Maicon area. So we mentioned Messi, we mentioned Cambiasso and Motta, but Maicon over them 2 legs, in particular the game they won 3-1, he actually scored a goal. He basically, and this is the one area of the pitch I found fascinating, because the only player that really got time on the ball for Barcelona was Keita. And Inter almost said, and I don't mean if Keita by some chance is watching this, I'm not being horrible, but Inter basically said, you can have the ball. We don't actually mind you having the ball. And if you look at the touches for the game, I think out of the entire Barca team, Keita had the second most, which is bizarre, because Barca at that time weren't playing their football through Keita. They weren't trying to score goals via Keita. But what Inter essentially said is, we'll let Keita have the ball. Anywhere on the pitch, Keita can have the ball. Unless he's in the final third, then we'll press him. But what that meant is they almost sacrificed Keita, and that allowed Maicon to go 2v1 against Maxwell on numerous occasions. And they were completely aware that Busquets wasn't going to be covering very often and would struggle to cover. And the biggest area where they really profited from is, I know Xavi's a wonderful footballer, but he never wanted to track his man. And they essentially said, we'll free up Maicon, and in return, you can free up Keita. We think Maicon's more dangerous. And I think it's the third goal. The second goal actually comes from that scenario where they get down the right-hand side. They get the ball into the box. And because Busquets has to cover the near post, it allows Schneider to get free back post. And Xavi was not going to track him. And there was 2 or 3 occasions, even in the first half, where Schneider kept just pulling away from Xavi. Because Busquets' job was to actually mark Schneider. But the problem he had is, because Maicon was now free, he was covering for Maxwell a lot. Eto'o was overloading that side. And they just tried to ensure Schneider could get free, and it worked a treat because he scored the second goal and he assisted the third goal in almost identical fashion, free back post both times.
Yeah, and that just shows the intelligence of Wesley Sneijder. He had a phenomenal season that year. It was 9 goals and assists in 11 Champions League starts.
Yeah.
So he was a key protagonist, and obviously had that freedom to try and get forward with Cambiasso and Motta behind him in the 4-2-3-1. So he felt he could make as many attacking runs as possible, really. And you're right, he's good at responding to other stuff that's going on around him. So, for example, the first goal, you're right, Busquets couldn't get there, obviously, because he had Maicon to deal with. But then also, it was Pandev had dragged Alves in, which meant Schneider had that space far post, and he ran into it. He sensed it straight away, got in there, and scored the goal, as you said. And then I'd like to mention a few other things about just going back to Pep's press and how he likes to win it back so quickly after losing it. I think Mourinho, it's interesting actually, Mourinho viewed Barca's greatest strength, the press, as also their greatest weakness. So after the game, he said, Mourinho, the moment to hurt them was an attacking transition when we recover the ball. Yeah. Because he knew Barca would commit loads of men forwards, and then that was where Inter could be at their greatest threat. And I think there were several things how Inter did that. Number one, they had powerful dribbling in transition. I think what the key guy to that was Goran Pandev, actually, because he was positioned quite deep in the defensive shape, which meant when Motta or Cambiasso would win back the ball, Pandev was the option, and he was the out ball. Pandev then, he was a very powerful dribbler of the ball, which many people don't realise. And he used to take out about 3 or 4 Barca players at a time sometimes. And that was, I think you saw that for the second goal, where Motta won it back, played it to Pandev. Pandev took out Xavi, Busquets, and Pedro in one dribble. And then he slid it into Milito, who crossed and Inter scored. So that was number one. Pandev actually, interesting, Mourinho then subbed him off at 55 minutes. Then reverted to that diamond shape that he played in the group stage, brought Dejan Stankovic on, packed the midfield to try and help him defensively, because obviously they got the 0-0 at the San Siro in the group stages. So from a defensive point of view, it actually worked quite well, the diamond. But then what Stankovic, he provided something else completely. He had that ball winning of Cambiasso and Motta, but he also had something extra. Stankovic passed through the press brilliantly. You saw that on a number of occasions. Stankovic got the ball back, and then he used to drill the passes into the wide channels, which suited Milito, as we talked about previously.
Yeah, I think when people think back to this game, they forget that people go as a defensive masterclass, which I definitely think it was. People also forget they scored 3 goals, and every single goal almost came from counter-attacking on Barca's biggest strength. Which, by the way, you're lagging really badly. I mean, the first goal, as you mentioned, Pandev steamrolls through 3 players. The second goal, they nicked the ball in a dangerous area. I think the third goal was epitomized everything they'd done well throughout the entire game. Motta wins it high up the pitch, shifts it really quickly, and all of a sudden they're in on goal. And I think that was the biggest area where Jose's side profited, because they handled going way back to what Barca were like. If you Barca's biggest problem in attack really was Ibrahimovic, because often Barca would play the ball and Messi and Ibrahimovic would fall deep, basically leaving Inter nobody to mark or worry about passing between the lines. So it was quite easy to stop Messi and Ibrahimovic causing problems and creating their own problems going forward, because that was the plan. It was essentially let Ibra and Messi have it, in particular Ibra, not Messi, steal the ball off them, hit it into the channels, get on the counter, and basically the transition was rapid. In all honesty, in a modern day time, it was Claudio Ranieri's Leicester. It was Kante getting the ball, getting it into Mahrez or getting it into Vardy, and the two interlinking really well. The good thing for Inter Milan was once they brought on Stankovic, they now had a different type of transition where they didn't just have to hit it into the channels. Stankovic's ability to actually pass between the lines was really, really good. So there's a couple of, in actual true fact, the game finished 3-1, but when it was 2-1, Inter actually had 2 or 3 really good chances from that passing between the lines. And that was like, people would completely forget the fact that in them moments, that game could have been 5-1. It wasn't like a 10 men behind the ball and they got away with one. It was a 3-1 and Barca got away with one.
Yeah. I think you're right. That is the epitome of Pete Mourinho. People mention the defensive side, as you said, but it's the way he transitioned from defense to attack. the structure he had in place. Obviously, the personnel that he had did help him as well. I think that dynamic between Eto'o and Milito was key, as well as the midfield we've already talked about. Once one of them dropped deep to try and connect the defence to the attack, the other one would then make that wide channel run immediately. They responded to each other's cues, really. Those guys just were in sync from a that kind of standpoint. And then I think the other thing is their speed as well. Barca obviously played that high line at that time. And then Eto'o and Milito were just really just waiting for one of them to take a step out of sync. And then they attack that space and make the run. And the speed of them, it was just frightening on the counter attack. And that was the key as well. And I don't think people realise Milito was actually pretty rapid. For his size, especially. I've not, in many ways, a bit like Erling Haaland. You don't expect a man of that size to have that speed, but Milito definitely did, and he made intelligent runs to go with it.
Yeah. I think that was the big thing as well for Inter Milan was when you had Milito and Eto'o, and this even till now. If you look at Pep Guardiola's team now at Manchester City, all that every team does is if we can get a defender 1v1 and we've got pace, we can cause problems. And that goes 10 years back to Inter Milan. That is exactly what Inter Milan did. It was basically try and get the ball into Eto'o or Milito, but it was never like to their feet so they could dribble past three players. It was into the channel. It was into space, put onto the ball, getting the ball into the box, and then wreak havoc. But in true fact, actually, the game took a slight turn. I think Abidal came on for Ibrahimovic, which, in all fairness, I completely forgot that happened. And I was watching it. I was like, what is he doing? But I think that was the biggest thing of Jose and Pep. They were always just trying to outdo each other to every little minute detail. So he brings on Abidal for Ibrahimovic, essentially to try and free up Messi, plays Maxwell into left midfield, and now they can stop Maicon coming forward. And so they negated that area of the pitch. Now, Inter Milan knew they were ahead at that point, so they essentially sat back themselves and almost put themselves under heaps of pressure because they were now going, we're going to sit in and you have to break us down. But Messi started to pick up the holes. And then what I found interesting, and it was, I mean, if you watch the game just from a tactical standpoint, ignore the scoreline, forget the goals, every few minutes something was getting tinkered constantly throughout the game. And there was a point just after halfway, half time, Xavi goes and plays into a fault. I don't know if you saw this play. It plays into like a false 10 for like 4 or 5 minutes, almost to see if Cambiasso and Motta will gravitate towards him, and they didn't. They were like, "We're not bothering with you, mate. You're not a problem. We've got to deal with a long-haired guy over here." So I found that really interesting. But yeah, Maxwell shifted up the pitch. Messi started to find space, and Pedro came more central. And Barca suddenly looked a little bit more dangerous. And then at the death of the game, he throws Piqué forward as well. And it was a bit of at that point, it was a bit of like we've got nothing left to lose, which is a Mourinho thing. So I found that so fascinating that I completely forgot that. I mean, 10 years ago, how old would I have been? I would have been like 18 years old. So I was just watching this game with a football fan. 10 years later, I'm watching this game with a lot more attention. But yeah, I just thought it was a real like tactical battle. One which I think, I mean, Jose definitely won. But people forget how close Pep was to actually winning this battle from a tactical standpoint. Because if they kept that 20 minutes up from the start of the game, and in them 20 minutes, they actually had 2 sitters. Pedro missed an absolute sitter. I think it was like back post, the ball drops like over his shoulder. I think it's Pedro, and he drags it 5 feet wide of the post. If that's Inter don't really have a plan. So I mean, it was a fascinating battle, and if I'm completely honest, I'd love to do more Pep and Jose games because they're the Madrid games, and I watched like highlights of one a few days ago, and the way these two just had to outdo each other constantly, it's bonkers.
There's definitely a bit of ego in there, isn't there, with the changes? I think those guys they always have to feel they've got to get one up on each other. I think I like that change you mentioned about the Maxwell change. I think number one, it did serve as a bit of an embarrassment for Ibra. That early on around 60 minutes, getting hooked for another left back, and then putting a natural left back at left wing. I think I looked at the stats. Maxwell's played less than 15 times as a left winger. So it really showed what Pep thought of Ibra's performance. I think and it's very interesting to contrast that with Milito. It was the exact opposite of what Milito provided. Ibra wasn't running the channels. And the other thing with Barca, over the years, we've seen the key of a good Barca team is a positional rotation between the front three. Ibra does not offer that. He wasn't swapping with Pedro on the right-hand side. He wasn't interchanging with Messi. And there was no link-up between the three either. There was no real cohesion between them. And I think there was an occasion I think, just before Ibra got hooked at it. He literally just stood in the top left corner of the box for about, I think it was 3 or 4 minutes, and he didn't move. He wanted that ball on his head, and he didn't want to offer himself as another option for any other kind of pass or delivery. He wanted it right on top of his head, and we've come to expect that from Ibra. When he gets the service, he's deadly. But in this Barca team, they're not used to throwing in quality crosses. Barca actually made 29 crosses in this game, and that is really, for this Barca team anyway, back then, they're not used to doing that. I think it was about 11 crosses on average they made in the Champions League that season. Not 29, that's for sure. But I think that was the key, really. Ibra, he didn't fit into the style, and I think it's pretty clear to see.
I think on one end of the pitch, if Milito won Mourinho the game, Ibra cost Barca the game. Obviously, there's a lot more ins and outs to the game, but I think if Milito was playing for Barcelona today, Barcelona win. Because what Barca required is someone who could move up front. And especially because Messi was now essentially in a chokehold from Cambiasso and Motta and even Zanetti at times. And in all fairness, he was getting clamped left, right, and centre. Ibrahimovic suddenly, he was like having Benteke up front. In the sense of like he wanted it route one, so it went completely wrong and pear-shaped for Barca because of that. I think the Ibra thing we should definitely discuss on the channel at some point. Why he didn't work under Pep and why he didn't work under Mourinho. Because if there was ever a game where you could probably understand why it didn't work under Pep, it was this one. And then equally, if there was ever a game you could wonder why it worked under Jose, it's probably also this one. So we should definitely look into that.
Yeah, I think it's no coincidence, really. I think Barca, before this season, they won the Champions League 2008, 2009, and that was a front three of Henry, Messi, and Eto'o. Messi and Eto'o often swap positions. Messi sometimes played the false nine, sometimes moved to the wing, allowing Eto'o to come up front. And then the season after this, they won the Champions League again. They won that with another fluid front three. It was David Villa, it was Messi again, and it was Pedro. And those guys were interchanging all the time. So I think that static focal point, it just didn't work for Pep's team at that time. I think at this point, it'd probably be pretty poignant to mention that how Sergio Aguero has adapted his game under Pep deserves a lot of praise, I think, because he could have easily gone down that path that Ibra's gone down and become a service-reliant striker who doesn't really fit into Pep's style of fluid rotation and linking play and being an outlet, really. But he didn't. He's adapted his game, molded it, and I think his link-up play has become a lot better under Pep. And it just shows it. Ibra's a top-class player, but even he couldn't adapt. So I think all kudos to Aguero.
Yeah, I think that should be a video. I've just thought of a video we do how strikers adapt under Pep, because and then we can look at the good ones and the not so good ones. Because Sergio Aguero, he was a gunman. He still is a gunman, but now he has the ability to actually link play up. He comes deep to receive the ball. He drops the ball wide. He creates chances. So massive kudos to him. That might be a video we look into. I think that's all, Raj, isn't it?
Yeah, just last one, I think, to mention the Mourinho's kind of last tactic in terms of in transition. The other thing is he wanted people to explode from that defensive block he had. Yeah. He wanted runners going into the box. I think that's something that Mourinho's lost, really. He's concentrated too much on that defensive side. But back then, for Inter, he wanted them to explode in the box from their defensive positions. And you saw that with Maicon in the first Inter goal. The way he covered that ground, nobody was going to track him. And he's under precise instructions from Mourinho to do that, because he did it several times throughout the game. He exploded past everyone. You could see Xavi desperately trying to get at him, but he couldn't manage it. And then he scores the goal. And then the other one was Wesley Sneijder. He wasn't actually at his playmaking best. Everyone remembers Sneijder for his passing, but it was his intelligence off the ball. You've already mentioned it. The way he found spaces in the box twice, first goal and then assist, that was key. I think he only created one chance in the game, one key pass, but that wasn't the point. Mourinho wanted him off the ball to use his intelligence and, again, flood the box with numbers. And then that's how we got that goal and assist and won into the game.
Yeah, what a great way to sum that up. I was going to have a little closing line, but you've done it for me. All right, thank you very much, Raj. Of course, if you're new to the Raj and Rambo channel, make sure you subscribe. Let us know what other content you want to see. We'll be tweeting stuff out. We'll be all over my Instagram as well, so check that out. All the links are in the description. And we've got videos planned. We're planning to do 2 videos a week, and anything on top is a bonus. It's lockdown season, so maybe you might get more than that. Drop a like on this video if you've enjoyed it, and we'll see you very